found out that this is a intro to religions class, and so this is the last course, the last religion discussed in this course. So I would gather to say that if I were to define humanity in a positive or negative word, I would use the word desperation and inspiration. After having taken other classes in this class itself, you would know that according to psychology, for example, Maslow, humanity progresses in a very kind of specific way. Once our basic human needs are met, then we feel like if we are able to progress past and start thinking, rationalizing, and etc. So I would say that humanity would start off in desperation, because if your human basic needs are not met, then it is hard for you to think of what is a good way of life, right? And then once those human basic needs are met, then you can progress into what I would consider inspiration. A child at tender age of 3 years old knows that if you hit the child, then it's bad, right? And we know that if the same child, if you feed that child when it's hungry, he knows that that thing is good, that person or that action was good. And so these things themselves are a foundational belief that once our human needs are met, then we can go and be able to focus on what later would be considered inspiration. And they serve their purpose. It always will serve its purpose. For society, for your basic needs to be met, then that means that you can work in an efficient and effective manner. After you do have food, then you can focus on innovation, for example. So we have what you would consider societal norm and inspiration, which is more of a thought process of mental and spiritual acuity here. And like I said, they serve their own purpose. A hungry worker is not going to be a good worker, right? It's just you're not going to be able to. Your workers will pass out. And a satisfied worker will be able to think of a problem to a solution to a problem that you have in work. Now, the thing is that with Islam, it requires a balance of what we consider the physical needs and the mental and spiritual needs of a person. And like Sister Riba was talking about, the word Islam itself is just talking about submission, right, to these principles that Allah, the God, al meaning the, and la meaning God, Allah has for humankind. Now, it stands to reason then that if there was a way to present this, then we would call this organized religion. Now, organized religion in itself is not something that is bad, because it gives you some kind of foundational principles on how to function in normal everyday world, right? This isn't your parents told you to go to school, they told you to take a shower, they told you vegetables were good for you. And Islam in itself is not any different. The only thing that I would say is that in today's world, because it's something that sounds like it's in a different language, it's always going to sound foreign and therefore a little bit scary, but it's not. And like Sister Ruba was saying, that there are instances all over the Quran that it does not call for specific people. It literally will say, "Oh mankind, oh humankind." If you stop to contemplate, you have the answer. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory here. I'm Puerto Rican, okay? I was adopted from a Christian missionary, and so when I say father or family, I'm referring to my adopted family. I'm not referring to any biological family, because I just don't know who they are. So when I was adopted from an orphanage in Puerto Rico, I came to the United States. My first language is Spanish, okay? Not Arabic, okay? My father was a Mexican German in the 1950s, which was a very difficult time to be any kind of mixed anything, okay? And then my adopted mother, was all kinds of white across all kinds of Europe areas, okay? So this was in itself a conundrum. And I come, because they were missionaries, the place that I grew up in is 99.1001 culture, one race. Okay, and we were one of the 3, maybe 4 families that were anything different. My father, like I said, being Mexican German, and my mother being all the Germans and Scottish and Europe, all of them, all colors of Europe. It was kind of interesting situation. And then we had one African American family and another Caucasian family. And so I remember very clearly on 9/11, I was in 12th grade with those big old clunky, big massive box TVs with the big rebar, I don't know what thing to hold it up, because that's how big and heavy they are. And nothing like this, right? But I'm still young and you better keep saying so. But anyway, so I remember staring at this box and they're showing 9/11 happening. And I'm like, but why? Like, what would prompt the people to do something so tragic, you know? And like I said, I was adopted, so my entire family comes from a line of educators. On both my mother's side, they were educators, and my mother was an educator, my father and my grandfather, they were educators. So I went and looked throughout their library, went to the libraries in the town, I went to the seminaries, and the only three things that I could find about Islam were, first of all, that the men had to marry non-Muslim women to propagate the religion, okay? Second of all, everybody's favorite no word, which is jihad. Third, that the Muslims would be a curse on the Christians. Now, at the tender young age of 12, you can see that something so vague and obscure would kind of be still confusing in itself, but I couldn't find any other information. Now, fast forward into adulthood, I moved to the DFW for, I would say, to start a new and safer life for myself and my children. At that point, I'm a single mother, still very Christian, non-denominational, very staunch in my belief system, and I can very freely say that my belief system has not actually changed being Muslim. In fact, being Muslim has made me a better Christian. Now, when I got to the DFW, I started working at Macy's, and the funniest thing happened to me. I walk in, and I'm pretty sure it happened to be Ramadan, because she was fasting, and she had been fasting several days, so I'm pretty sure it must have been like the first occasion to hear about Ramadan. And I walk into the break room, and I stop, and I'm like, oh my God, my first real live Muslim. Like, I've never been exposed to any other like diverse people of any kind. And yes, that's the exact thought that went through my head, okay? And so I'm looking at her, and it still took me like 2 or 3 weeks to just kind of approach her, but I'm the kind of person, like I said, at 12 years old, I'm asking these existential life questions. I was an avid reader. I would say by 3rd grade, I think I might have read all of Shakespeare works, and I was all into all kinds of college stuff. So I was an avid reader, but I could not, or it kind of had passed to the opportunity to learn more about Islam. So I had read by that point all about every other kind of religion, but I really hadn't looked into Islam. And so I walked into this room, and I'm like, oh my God, it's a real life Muslim. And I didn't say that out loud, obviously, but it's like, oh my God, and she's wearing the thing. And it took me 2 or 3 weeks, and I finally went up to her and I said, listen, the thing is, I'm not the kind of person that likes to live in ignorance. I like the truth. And I want to know, point blank, is everyone allowed to read your scriptures, or is that you have to be born into the religion to be able to have access to your scriptures? And she was like, nope, here you go, boom, 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 and a lot of more booms, okay? And I started to read, and at this point, I'm still Christian, very, very Christian, and have no intention to try to become anything other than more Christian. And so I look at everything she gives me from a standpoint of a secular student, not a person who is looking at the theology of what Islam is, because I was assuming, hey, you know, it's gonna be pretty crazy and different because, you know, like I said, propagate the religion, what the jihad, what is that? And, you know, why would they be a curse on us, right? On Christians. So I'm reading and reading and reading and reading, and like I said, I was still going to church at that time, and funny circumstances happened to make me ask the existential life question. And if you're reading this and you're finding out that it's not any different than what you staunchly believe in, it's just more to the point, what's stopping you? And so I did land up becoming a Muslim, And I'm going to share with you a couple of things about what I found in Islam that I had not found in any part of researching or reading or talking to anyone who was not Muslim. And I'm going to tell you, it's from the start. There's 4 concepts that Islam talks about that actually, and even in secular science, is incredibly important to understand. And without the understanding of these concepts, then pretty much the rest of society can crumble. And we'll talk about and see that in a minute. The first word is fitra. And the easiest way to translate that into English would be your nature, your blank slate, what you're born with, okay? Like she said that in the Quran, in Islam, it does tell us that, hey, you are born with that slate, but it's not actually blank, okay? And like I described, a child of 3 years old will know if you're doing something that is good or bad. If somebody comes into the door and tries shooting us up, like it has happened in this country, we would know that that action is bad. And if somebody came in here and said, listen, guess what? I'm going to pay off everybody's education, you would look at that action as good. And that's not something that you need an organized religion to tell you, right? The next word is aql. Aql meaning, in English you would say anything that has to do with reason, with the mind, with your intellect, your ability to think through something, okay? We have the nafs, and the nafs in Arabic, the closest way you would think about that in secular science or a secular school would be the id, or the ego, which is from Greek philosophy, okay? So where they were trying to think, okay, well, I have food in my belly, now what? And so they were thinking, okay? Thinking is not evil, thinking is good, okay? But nafs doesn't just mean your id or your ego. It is basically neither good nor bad. It's about your survival. And like I said at the beginning, without the ability to fulfill basic human needs, you won't get to the point where anything else is actually of interest to you, right? If no one can eat because there is no food, you're not going to legislate laws on how to handle food production. You're not going to legislate laws on how to make sure that, you know, someone isn't stealing from someone else because nobody has food, right? So the same thing with security, with home, with your shelter. So then Islam talks that there is this concept of what is the person's nature, their blankish slates. Then you have your reasoning ability, and then you have the part of you that is about your basic survival needs, your desires to survive, your desires to have children, your desires that doesn't particularly relate to what is actually good or evil, okay? And then the fourth concept, that it's actually 2 words, but I stick them together because it's still a type of singular concept, and that is God consciousness. Now, taqwa, okay, I'll say tawakkul first. So the word tawakkul is more than just God consciousness or fear of God or anything like that. Tawakkul is when you put trust in the truth of the conviction that what the God, Allah, in our case, Allah is saying is true. Because you won't particularly trust or move forward with something if you don't believe that its basic principles are true, right? If you didn't, it didn't hit you in the heart and you have conviction for it. And then you have taqwa, which still goes further than just God consciousness to now you're taking what you believe to be true and you're not only accepting it, but you're submitting to it, and you're going to make the effort to do what is good and to stay away with what is bad according to the principles that this deity, Allah, has given, okay? So these principles in itself still relates to today's secular psychology, secular schooling and stuff like that, in so much that people recognize that there is some kind of nature versus nurture. There is a reasoning ability and differing levels of the ability to reason, right? And that there is a survival instinct that is base animal desires to survive. And then you have, well, okay, what do you believe in? Okay, what is your foundational belief of how all of this is going to tie together? Now we know that whenever things like this is out of balance, right, then you have a lot of problems, and a lot of them can derive from physical ailments to mental diseases And putting both together, you have a pretty stressed out individual. Now, if there's a lot of stressed out individuals, then we have a pretty stressed out in society. And if we have an incredible imbalance of this, then we see corruption. And so when I was looking through and reading about Islam, I realized that what Islam was actually calling the person to be was balanced, literally homeostasis, right? Literally harmonize the truth of what is around you in your life. Now, granted, we don't always know what that is, and we go through different cycles where we ask different questions, but Islam didn't say just believe and you're going to be saved. Islam says this is what this is what this is. Now believe in it, act upon it, and then you get the reward, you get the consequence. Now, whenever you say consequence, a lot of kids, right, because I'm a teacher, so if I say consequence, everybody goes, oh my God, I'm in trouble. No, not really. Consequence is just the effect of what you've done, right? So if without some kind of moral instruction or moral compass, then people don't really, like, anything goes, right? Has anybody heard of The Purge, the movie The Purge? The Purge, right? There's a whole bunch of them, right? In The Purge, there's become, the society has become so imbalanced. It becomes a dystopian society in which everybody has agreed that, listen, we're going to give everybody a single day in which they can commit every single type of crime. Anything goes, okay? And I believe that the rest of the year, if somebody does commit a crime, it's like instant death or something. But anyway, in that one day, you can do anything, okay? Now, what Islam itself is trying to teach the people is that, first of all, that's not necessary, okay? You are human that lives in a society with other people, and this is how we communicate and we participate in this society to make it a fruitful, uncorrupted, progressive, harmonized world. It's possible, right? It's very possible if we also follow the pure tenets of what the moral compass that we follow is. Now, do you need organized religion for that? Actually, even if you're agnostic, you have some type of religion. Religion is just basically an action, a belief system that you follow every single day, okay? Now, a religion in itself is not bad. Choosing to say you don't have a religion in itself is not bad. But for the Muslim, I discovered going through these texts and going through what is the collection of what the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, would say, I discovered that Islam isn't completely comprehensive, okay, to the point where it teaches you how to clean yourself after you use the bathroom. In today's science, it tells you, well, listen, water is actually better for you than wiping yourself with trees, okay, or stone, or pine cones, whatever they use, okay? And it's to prevent diseases, to prevent imbalances of your hormones and stuff like that, right? And that's something that was talked about back then, about the cleanliness of the hands. In hospitals, actually, the way that hospitals were made, I didn't mention this in the other one, but the way that hospitals were made for optimal patient health, okay? It talked about human rights. Okay, it talks about all the sciences, like I just mentioned sciences. It talked about human rights, and it also talked about leadership and laws, and it was completely comprehensive. Even Harvard itself, their law school has determined that the Quran in its pure state is the most and best comprehensive legal system known to mankind. There's no unfairness about it. Inheritance was divided a very particular way. How you were able to obtain homes, contracts, how you're supposed to be able to deal in business, marriage, who you could and couldn't marry. And now we know, anybody watch, was it not Chainsaw Massacre? It was the other one where they were like, Silent Hill, was it Silent Hill? There was a horror movie where there was a lot of inbreeding, and they would do like crazy stuff, like a lot of murder and stuff.
Wrong Turn?
Which one?
Wrong Turn?
Wrong Turn, there we go, Wrong Turn. And so it tells you, okay, well, we stay away from that kind of stuff because it's muy bad, okay? And then we have things that were like very simple, like take what you need when you need it. We have things like even rules of war. And I'm going to mention rules of war for however, very cautiously we want to take it, because it is a reality of today's society. Now, Islam in its not adulterated or corrupt form, we wouldn't have war. But what do we do when we do? Okay, and it talked about that. You don't just go and say, hey, we're different, so I'm just gonna go up and kill you, which is tying back to what I thought jihad was. Now, jihad in Arabic, if I translate it into its simplest form in English, it just means a struggle for the sake of God, right? You can have a struggle for anything. Do I eat this cookie or not? Well, I'm gluten intolerant, so if I eat that cookie, I'm gonna be in a lot of pain, okay? I also have problems with my blood, so if I eat that cookie, my sugars are gonna go out the roof. You know what I mean? That in itself is a struggle, because Islam called for homeostasis, for balance, for harmony, right? So then it tells you even don't cut down trees, don't tamper with your enemy's water. Children are sacred, women are sacred, and sacred meaning like they're untouchable. You're not allowed to hurt them in any way during an engagement of war. Okay, then the older people, you want to protect them. Not only are they not fighting, right? They have knowledge that the next generation needs. And if you go and kill all the old people, then you're gonna really be in dystopian society, because nobody knows what to do, right? And even to the point where it's like, if someone does not have a weapon in their hand, you do not get to just up and attack them. If they drop their weapon, even if they were fighting you and you're at the point of breath, if they drop their if they drop their weapon, you drop yours. Now, there is no other place in my course of studies of religion that would ever talk about that. Something that you would be like, what? Like, if they have a weapon in their hand and they drop it and you still have to drop your weapon? It doesn't matter that they just killed all of your family? Yeah. Yeah, for real. So when I was studying, I was realizing that a lot of my preconceptions about what Islam was just not correct. The first one being that Muslim men had to marry non-Muslim women to propagate the religion was completely false. And remember, this was several years ago. I was 12 years old, and I can understand, well, I was reading a book written by someone who was not Muslim in the first place, okay? So their idea was incorrect. Jihad didn't mean just go up and kill everybody who wasn't Muslim. It meant struggling in the cause of God, which is calling for balance, harmony, justice, okay? And then you had that Muslims would be a curse on the Christians. Now, it didn't come into adulthood where I could understand that context, because up until today's world, we still have issues where you have people that believe that it's an Arab versus non-Arab thing, but Arab is just an ethnicity. It's not a religion. You can have, like she said, anybody can make the choice of what moral compass or code that they're gonna follow. Okay, now when you go through this class, and I'm actually pretty much about to get to the conclusion, but when you go through this class, okay, I want you to think about what I've said and understand that I am convicted on being Muslim, and it has made me a better Christian. But you guys have to find the purpose and reasoning beyond, I have to take this class to get a degree. What benefit are you going to listen and take from everything that you have learned? And how are you going to become the better human that you are being called to be? Okay? And for us, we're being called by Allah, the God. Okay? Now, with that being said, okay, Islam calls for the balance of your mind, your body, and your spirit, right? And the consequence for that is that, generally speaking, with more balanced individuals, society as a whole will flourish. Okay? That is what the call of Islam really is. Take care of creation, flourish together as one people with the tenets that I'm giving you. Stay away from the things that are bad for you. Do these things because they're good for you, okay? And when you look through these things, ask yourself the fundamental question is, if whatever it is that you were learning or what you were doing or what you have been doing with your life is not as important as what you're going to choose to do with that information and move forward. Okay? We are called not to be stagnant waters. Does anybody know what stagnant waters smell like? Anybody gone past Trinity? Trinity Lake. Anybody know what stagnant waters smell like? Do you know what stagnant means?
Yeah, it smells like death.
Oh, it smells like death, okay? Now, stagnant means that there's no, stagnant waters typically do not have an exit or an entry. So it'd be like some depression, some like divot in the ground, collected a bunch of water, and it doesn't have a place to go. So the things underneath start to die, decay, and it just smells pretty dang horrible. Now, don't be stagnant waters with what you have learned throughout this course. Okay? Be the person that takes what you learn and figures out how to apply it in a positive way, because we do face certain things. We don't live on an island by ourselves, each person. We do have to function in society. So what you're learning, or what you have learned, or what I'm hoping has inspired you to continue to learn, should improve your life in some way, in whichever way that it does. And if it's something that makes your life an improvement but screws everybody else over, that's not an improvement, okay? I'm just telling you that right now. It's not an improvement, okay? It's not about the YOLO lifestyle, because we live in a society that needs each other, okay? So with that being said, I would like to open up the floor for any questions that you may have. You can ask me any personal questions from my journey, Sister Ruba, for any personal questions, but also any other questions that you have related to Islam itself.